Okay, folks, we're going to get started. All the panelists are here, which is wonderful, and thank you to our panelists. I'll be thanking them a couple of times during this evening. My name is Jack Baert. I'm Managing Director at Venture for ClimateTech, and I'll be the facilitator today. We have a great session in store for you on the East Coast this evening and mid-afternoon on the West Coast. I have a few quick Zoom logistics to go through. Because this is a webinar, there's a chat feature, of course, which I think you've all found just a few minutes ago. But there's also a Q&A function right next to it. If you have any questions for the panelists, please enter them into the Q&A, not in the chat. This session is really all about having an opportunity to talk to someone who's gone through an accelerator. We like to think a really strong accelerator, the Venture for ClimateTech Accelerator. So please ask any questions that you may have about entrepreneurship, early stage challenges, and so forth. And our panelists will certainly answer them. They're extraordinary folks. Scott and Chris, actually supposed to be Chris tonight, and Devin, I'm sorry, on my team, we're monitoring and responding. We'll also have some time at the end for questions from the audience. Okay, let's jump right in. Again, I'm Jack Baert, Managing Director at Venture for ClimateTech. As a small introduction to Venture for ClimateTech, we're a not-for-profit accelerator. We're funded by NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy and Research Development Authority. So ratepayers, electric ratepayers in New York State, residential and commercial, really fund research through New York State, and NYSERDA funds us. Their focus with us is, of course, early stage innovation in climate and energy. So we've been in existence now for 3 years. There was a preceding program also funded by NYSERDA called Nexus New York that Devin, who's on the call, was actually involved in. And our focus is helping early stage climate and energy innovators get to the next level, really to help them get to commercialization, to get funded, and to really grow their company and get their ideas out there into the real world, well, so that they can really have an impact on GHG. That's kind of our primary criteria is maximum global greenhouse gas reduction. And that is really the big focus. We also do have a focus on diversity, and we had a tremendous group this year in cohort 3. It's a 6-month virtual program, so we have companies from all around the world that participated over the last 3 years. We've had over 1,100 companies apply up until this January 3rd. We're now in our 4th cohort, so 4th year of applications. So we've got applications rolling in. I think we have about 139 in process right now so far. Applications close on March 1st, and the program actually launches May 1 this year. Part of the beauty of the program is not only is there a lot of mentorship from an entrepreneur in residence program through Columbia University, but we have mentors of our own and who are experienced in entrepreneurship and growing companies, in my case, from 0 to over 2 billion. And so we've got a lot of manufacturing expertise as well. And part of the beauty is you can be awarded up to $50,000 in non-dilutive funding by the end of the program. So, and I think I think most people are really excited about the $50,000, but in reality, what we hear back in surveys from the co-founders that go through the program is actually the mentorship and the introductions that really have made the largest impact for the folks who've gone through it. With us today are 2 of our recent alums, Jose Porro, founder and CEO of Cobalt Water, based in New York City, and Karen Baert, co-founder and CEO of Ammobia. They're going to be talking a great deal about their technologies, their teams, their journey to date, and they're both extraordinary. They're wonderful alums of our program and just remarkable folks. So we're going to start off with the first question. We're going to start with Karen. And Karen, can you tell us a bit about your company, Ammobia, and your motivation in terms of co-founding it? And let's go with that. And then, Jose, we're going to ask you the same question in just a moment.
Thank you, Jack. And hello, Jack. And excited to be here together with you, Jose, as well. And hello to everyone on the other side of the line. I'm Karen. I'm co-founder and CEO at Ammobia. I grew up as a sailor on the Belgian North Sea, and sailing is actually what got me into climate tech. It's in my early teenager years that I decided that finding a way to help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions is what I wanted to focus my professional life on. Brought me on a very long journey on entrepreneurship, strategy consulting, master degree in renewable energy engineering, and then an MBA, and sometime as a venture capital investor to ultimately start Ammobia 2 years ago officially. Ammobia is focused on technology development to produce ammonia in a clean and cost-effective way. We're a seed stage company right now. And so the goal of that clean ammonia is really to decarbonize some of our most difficult to decarbonize sectors like fertilizers, so the agriculture industry, but also maritime shipping, where ammonia can be used as a fuel for shipping and also in the power sector.
Beautiful. Thank you, Karen. Jose, tell us a little bit about Cobalt Water, please, and your motivation for launching Cobalt.
Sure. So we're climate tech for the water industry, and we have an all-in-one AI and machine learning platform to help water utilities reduce their nitrous oxide emissions from wastewater treatment plants. And nitrous oxide is a powerful greenhouse gas. It makes up the majority of the wastewater treatment plant greenhouse gas emissions because of its high global warming potential, which is 300 times more than CO2. So a lot of water utilities around the world have to meet net zero targets. So to meet these targets, they have to do something about their nitrous oxide emissions. So this is where we're able to come in and help them in each step of that N2O reduction journey. I got into this because I had been working as an environmental engineer for a number of years in the water industry, and was led to environmental engineering through a similar, I think, experience as Karen, just being near the ocean all the time and having a really strong connection with the ocean and nature, and because of that, wanting to protect it. So that's how I got into environmental engineering. Once I was in there, I'd been working for a number of years. I'd gone back for a master's in environmental engineering. And at some point, it dawned on me that we were solving one environmental problem by treating wastewater, by creating another one, which was the greenhouse gas emissions, because the nitrous oxide is a byproduct of the wastewater treatment process, but it doesn't have to be if you're operating in the right way. So that's what we want these wastewater treatment plants to achieve, is the proper wastewater treatment plant or wastewater treatment, but without producing the nitrous oxide.
Beautiful. Thanks, Jose. And Jose and Karen share one other attribute, and that's they're both very international folks. I mean, throughout the program, over the 6 months that we worked with Jose, he was often in Europe. We had meetings with him when he was in Spain and traveling really in large portions of Europe. And of course, Karen is originally from Europe. So the second question is, at what stage would you describe your company when you first applied to the program, and maybe a little bit about the journey since then? So Jose, we'll start with you this time, and then we'll go to Karen. Jose, at what stage would you, when you first joined the program, were you at, and where are you now?
Yeah, so I would say we were, and still are, technically at pre-seed stage, early stage, even though we had gone through Techstars in 2020. But I think in hindsight, we were, even though we had a really good idea that Techstars believed in, when it came to going out there and trying to scale and get investors interested, we were too early. The market wasn't quite there yet. But that gave us an opportunity to really focus on building the team, building the platform, getting those early customers. So prior to participating in V4C, we did have some customers, but even during the program, it really started hockey sticking in a way. So I think the timing was really good because not only were we getting to the point where the market had almost fully turned, but it was fully turning at the right time in terms of going through the program, because the program really helped us prepare to be more investor ready. And at the same time, I think thinking of how we need to be positioning ourselves as a company to raise money and start scaling, it just also helped in how we were communicating to customers and helping to close deals more. So at where we are now is essentially we're in the middle of a pre-seed round. We have 2 investors that are currently in due diligence. So this is like the farthest we've been able to come, because like I said before, we've tried raising money in the past, and the conversations were always like we were too early. But we also weren't quite investor ready. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we were coming out of the program.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jose. Karen, the same question for you. What stage would you describe Ammobia when you first joined the Venture for ClimateTech program? V4C is what we call it. We abbreviate it. So when you joined V4C, and what stage are you at now?
All right, let's travel back in time. I think it's exactly about a year ago that we started working our application for V4C. Back then, frankly, we were a project. I was working on Ammobia full-time from my studio in San Francisco. My co-founder was still doing his PhD and working for Ammobia part-time, sorry. We had a few contractors with us working already, but we had very little runway. So funding was a key pain point. And so we had a mission, we had a dream, but there were a lot of challenges. And there were a lot of things that we had to do every day that we had never done before, right? From finding the right lawyers, creating our first patents, growing the team, refining our value proposition for potential customers and for investors. So that's where we were when we applied. Where we are now is we're a seed stage company. So we're around 5 full-time employees, 5 part-time, growing the team towards 10 full-time employees by the end of the year. We moved into our own office and lab space. We have our patents filed. We have a much clearer value proposition. And we have about 18 to 24 months runway to continue to grow the company and develop the technology.
Beautiful. Thank you. Karen, I'll go to you again next now. Could you describe the biggest problems that Ammobia was facing when you first started at Venture for ClimateTech? I mean, you just kind of gave us a little bit of history there, which is helpful, and really why you and Tristan, your co-founder, decided you should join Venture for ClimateTech and go through the accelerator.
Yeah. So I mentioned a few things already, but to put it in a bit more of a structured ways, first thing was we needed to raise money, and we urgently needed to raise money. And there was still a lot we had to learn on being fully investor ready. So having the value proposition kind of laid out in a very clear way, but also having a structured process on how to go about starting to fundraise and doing it in a very systematic way. So that's one key bucket. The second bucket was all the other stuff around company building. So there was a lot we had to learn on how actually to hire for our first critical roles, how to think about growing the team, setting up the company in its very early days, how to make choices with very limited resources on kind of what to spend money on, and all the things that come with that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Karen. Jose, same question for you. The problems that you think that Cobalt was facing predominantly when you first joined Venture for ClimateTech, and really what was the primary driver in your decision to join the accelerator at V4C?
Well, I think the biggest problem was being investor ready. So we had been having a lot of conversations with investors, and we just didn't fully have all the pieces together to close a deal. So that was the main issue we were dealing with, and getting customers actually hasn't been that difficult lately. In the beginning, it was because no one was interested in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But as the years went on, there's more and more interest in actually net zero targets that now have to be met. So that kind of changed the game for us, and now it's made it a lot easier to get customers. And I think just being in the water industry for a really long time, knowing how the customers think and almost knowing them like the back of my hand really helps a lot. So that wasn't really a big problem. It's more the investor readiness. And I think that in the kind of like the main reason it was clear that this would be a program for us was that we had been actually working or doing climate tech for a long time in the water industry before, because like the company actually started as a consultancy in 2015, combining the N2O reduction with other water services, because to pay the bills, it was really the other water services that were doing it. But I think because we were actually working on N2O reduction, we were climate tech in the water industry before there was ever climate tech. I think if someone said climate tech 5 years ago, they probably think it's something you're wearing to keep you warmer or something like that. But it's really grown each year for the last few years. And when you say climate tech, everyone knows what you're talking about now. But because we had been in the water industry, we hadn't been exposed to the ecosystem or to the climate tech investors. So I knew that it would be good to participate. V4C would be able to open those doors in terms of what's going around globally in climate tech, but also because it's New York based and New York funded, it would also be a really good opportunity to get connected with what's happening in New York, because for us, we also happen to be in New York. So I thought that was important as well.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jose. One quick point for everyone who's participating and listening in. We've got some questions coming in through the Q&A. We're going to actually address them for everyone, because there's some good questions coming through. So please continue to ask questions in the Q&A. And as we go along, we're actually going to have our panelists address every single question that comes in through the Q&A. So don't despair if you're not getting an answer right away. The next question, I'll go back to you again, Jose. Jose, what did you find most valuable in the Venture for Climate Tech program? How did it help Cobalt Water the most?
I think, can it be two things?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So it was really two things. And one, I've been alluding to the investor readiness, but it was not so, definitely it was investor readiness, but even more so connections to climate tech investors. And I would say, because we've participated in, I mentioned Techstars and another accelerator, there was a B2B sales accelerator, which is excellent, Pax Momentum, give them a little plug. But I would say, because we're climate tech and Venture for Climate Tech is 100% focused on climate tech, it was a program that really connected us the best to the right investors or the right investor network. And between everyone on the team, Jack, the others, and their network, I don't think there's another program that could connect you to the climate tech VC world than what V4C can do. So that was one of the two biggest things. And the next one was the Entrepreneur in Residence program. I think that was instrumental in helping us get ready as well.
Beautiful, Jose. Thank you. And just before we go to Karen with the same question, one of the unusual things I've found is even going all the way back into the preceding program, Nexus New York, we still have relationships that kind of span the years. And so my expectation is that I'll know Jose and Karen for many, many years and help them any way I can, because that's because my team and I think we're in this for the right reasons. We're really we're trying to help co-founders and brilliant folks like Karen and Jose get to the next level. And it's fighting climate change is a big deal. Karen, what are your thoughts in terms of what you and Tristan found most valuable in the program, and why?
Yeah, I'm gonna mention 4 buckets if that's okay.
Sure.
But I'll try to be brief. I think the first one is programming. I think it very much came at the right time for us, and it was a great overview to kind of everything that comes with starting a climate tech company. To give you a bit more color there, so the program started with a boot camp where we had a lot of kind of sessions on kind of all the fundamentals, all the way from how do you bring technology to the market? How do you pitch to investors? How do you attract investors? How do you hire? And all of these things were very valuable ways to kind of set the fundamentals for each of these pieces of company building. And we learned a lot from each one of these. The second one would be linked to mentors and investors. One part of the program was called Mentor Madness. And I can tell you it was pretty mad because it was 2 weeks where we talked to at least 10 different potential mentors. And at the end, there were a few of these mentors that we then got matched with that continue to support us through the rest of the program. And this was so valuable because first it came right before we started fundraising, and it was such a good way to train ourselves to be very clear on our value proposition and get real feedback from these mentors, because a lot of these mentors were investors that put their mentor hat on, which meant that they actually gave you the real feedback, which was super valuable for us to refine our pitch and refine our value proposition before we went out fundraising. Another example there is we got the chance to pitch at New York Climate Week. There were a lot of investors in the room. This was a great way for us to build connections with investors. And on the geography component, maybe a different angle here than for Jose is that we are based in California, but New York is obviously an important strategic region for us. And the V4C program was a great way for us to expand our network from California to New York. So if I think about our current investor base, more than half of them are New York-based investors. And a lot of that is thanks to this program. And want to highlight or emphasize the point that Jack mentioned. The program was 6 months, but still today, and I'm hoping that this will continue, and I trust it will. Every week we get a connection or we have a touch point with someone thanks to the program. So it very much continues, and it continues to be so fruitful for Ammobia. Third thing is one-on-one mentorship. So we had sessions every single week with Jack and some other core team members where we spent an hour with the team where we could just throw all our biggest issues on the table. And that was so helpful to get quick and valuable feedback on the biggest things we were struggling with every single week. And especially people like Jack who've been there before, who have so much experience going through the roughest times as well, to get their feedback and their support as well through every single stage of the journey. And the last one was funding. It was great to get some additional non-dilutive funding. And so it was really cool that the program provided that as well, on top of all the other ways it added value to the company.
Beautiful, Karen. So this one's kind of like a follow-on. If you had to choose the main differences, or really the main, I'll say main growth issues that occurred between you and the company from the beginning of the program until now, what would those be? What do you think are the biggest growth factors, I guess I'll say, in terms of changes that have occurred at Ammobia? And then I'll ask Jose the same question.
Good question. I think in terms of like company building toolkit and company building, let's call it network, maybe we had 20% of each before the start of the program. I think if we look at where we're at today, we have at least 50% of the toolkit, but more importantly, we have 80% of the network. And so we know that while we might not always have the answer immediately, we have a network and a community that can support us and that can help us get to the answer.
It's wonderful. I think I might I have asked Chris to write all that down. That was great. Thank you. Jose, the same question, really, the biggest changes, the biggest growth factors from the beginning of the program to now in terms of for you personally and for Cobalt Water.
I think probably the biggest one is what I sort of mentioned before, that we had been doing climate tech, but not really a climate tech company. And now we really feel like we're a climate tech company. And that's because of tapping into this ecosystem that continues to grow a lot each year. So, and from understanding how contracts are being drawn up, because we're selling carbon reduction, carbon credits is relevant to what we're doing, and you can get really lost in terms of how to navigate selling carbon credits. But now, because we're officially part of this ecosystem, and I think similar to what Karen mentioned, you always have like a permanent touch point available. So in TechStars, they like to say TechStars forever, but I think the way the accelerator works, it's also V4C forever. So it's really good to know that support network is there, that didn't exist before, and it really feels like that you can really tackle any issue related to climate that comes up because of that, whereas before that didn't exist.
That's wonderful, Jose. I'm going to write that down too. V4C forever. I love it. Thank you. That's great. Jose, next question for you is, what is the one thing that surprised you the most about the V4C program? I mean, you had been through some other accelerators. So what was the one thing that surprised you most about Venture for ClimateTech?
I guess I really wasn't, because of having been through a couple of other accelerators, which did well to connect us with investors, but I wasn't anticipating how well we were going to get connected through the program. So yeah, I thought that it would be a good idea to do it because it would expose us and better connect us, but I didn't realize to what level it would be, and it was to a much greater level than I anticipated.
Got it. Thank you. Karen, the same question for you. What's the one thing that surprised you most about the program?
I want to highlight another part of the kind of community aspect, which is more kind of the community within the cohort, so amongst entrepreneurs and with the program team. I think especially when you go to fundraising, it can be really hard. It can be really lonely as well. And we talked to 110 investors. We are very lucky to end up with a great set of 8 investors that are backing us right now, but it also means we had more than 100 investors say no to us. And I think these are some of the things that aren't always broadly talked about. And having a community of fellow founders that are going through the same thing, and having a community of program managers that support you and that have gone through the same thing was very valuable. Also just from a support perspective as we went through the program. And I think they're one of the things that the V4C team is great at as well is it's so cool that the program is global, and also they managed to find multiple ways to get everyone together in person. And so many of us came together in New York for the New York Climate Week, and there was another touch point in California where a lot of us were together, and that really creates that community aspect that will hopefully last very long and has been very valuable to us already.
Wonderful. Thank you. Karen, what was the most challenging part of the program, and why do you think that particular part was challenging?
Good question. I would say the mentor madness. I already referred to it. I think it was very challenging and also very valuable. So again, it was this 2-week program period where we talked to at least 10 mentors and had, I think, 1-hour sessions with each of them. It was hard because they really grilled us on our technology, on our value proposition. They gave us tough feedback. But they also really helped us refine our value proposition before we started talking to investors.
Got it. Thank you. Jose, same question for you. What was the most challenging part of the program and why?
So I guess probably the most challenging thing, which is not really new, but it didn't go away participating in the program, and that's just being an early stage startup with limited resources, limited funding. So it's a challenge because now you're also, in addition to all the other things that you're trying to do, participating in the program, which is important to really invest the time, because if you don't, you're only going to get what you're going to get out of the program is only what you really put in. So from experience, I know I'm glad that I invested the time, and it was a challenge, like making that decision too, because you feel stressed and pressured to be doing all the other things you need to be doing and don't want to be distracted. But sometimes it's also good to slow down. And I think it was Jackie Mabla who mentioned this. It's slowing down to speed up. So it was, challenging to make that decision because you're always wanting to go, but you really kind of need to take a step back and take a close look. And that was the main reason I think we were always having trouble fundraising, because we're going before we were actually ready. So by investing the time to slow down to then speed up was I think the right decision. And but that was a struggle. So I guess I would suggest making sure that you do invest the time. Don't give in to that pressure to just keep doing what you're doing, because that could end up leading nowhere.
Say those are some great points. I'm actually just going to elaborate a little bit before I ask the same question of Karen, because there's one company in particular, I won't name who they were, that came through this latest cohort, and they really wanted introductions to investors before they were ready, well before they were ready. And we kept counseling them that they weren't ready yet, they weren't ready yet, they weren't ready yet. And they kept just insisting and kind of beating the drum that they wanted investor conversations. And we try to make it clear that if you have investor conversations before you're really ready for those conversations, before you're ready from a product or service standpoint, before you're ready from a really having a data room ready to go, you've got your pitch down, you really understand your marketplace and all of that, and quite a few other things, but at least those, unless you're truly ready to meet in a meaningful way and potentially have a winning conversation with an investor, you're going to burn a lot of bridges and a tremendous amount of time, and also just raise your frustration level to an extraordinary degree. And so that's one of the things that the team and I have been focusing on, really just kind of, we're going to really focus on that early in this next cohort as we bring on the new applicants. Karen, so in the same question for you. Ultimately, what would you say was the most you already gave me the most challenging part of the program, right? So it's going to go back to Jose again. Sorry, Jose. Jose, could you describe where your company is right now in terms of major projects you're working on and what you're going to be working on next? I guess we don't have to go out a year or anything like that. That's kind of crazy, but maybe just the next quarter.
Yeah, so I think right now the biggest priority is kind of two things, because they're equally important. Is raising the pre-seed round, closing the pre-seed round. So we are in due diligence with a couple of investors, have others follow-up conversations with several others. So we have a lot of momentum. So we're going to stay focused on that until it's done. And then the other thing is really delivering on some pilots that we have going on. We have several in multiple countries, and some of these are for utilities that have like hundreds of sites. So if the pilots go well, we're literally sitting on gold mines. So if we don't focus on that, then we could be missing out big time. So those are really the two things that we're really focusing on right now.
Cool. Thanks, Jose. Karen, the same question for you. So the major kind of things you're focusing on right now and what you see as the next biggest challenges that Ammobia is going to face.
Yeah, for us, there's two big goals and milestones for this year. One is on the technology side, one is on the market side. On the technology side, we're moving our technology from TRL4, basically our lab scale demonstrations, so a chemical reactor that is this size, to TRL5, which we call our technology demonstrator, which is going to be like table size. It's a huge step for us because that's for us where we fully de-risk our science. That's on the technology side. Now on the market,
Karen, I'm just going to ask you for a second because some folks might be at really early stage and they don't even know what a TRL is. If you could just tell everybody, all the folks who've tuned in, what a technology readiness level is and what that means.
Absolutely. Sorry. So TRL stands for technology readiness level, and that goes all the way from 1 to, I think the upper bound is 10. And
kind of like 9 because 10 you're actually in business, I guess.
Okay.
Fully.
Yeah. And it basically shows where you are on the scale from very fundamental research, a lot of science risk in the lab, to commercial scale, market ready, big systems in the industry. And so this scale is also, a lot of investors use that as well to think about like, to which extent do you still have science risk? Versus have you already de-risked most of the science and are you mainly focused on scaling up? So we moved from that TRL4 level, which is still in the lab, still a good amount of science risk, towards the TRL5 level this year, which is more of a, we figured out most of the science, now it's about taking this system and scaling it up. So that TRL 4 to 5 is a big milestone for us, and is also what we definitely think we need before we go out to Series A investors, because Series A investors want to see that the science is fully de-risked, and you're just thinking about how do we now take that product and scale that up effectively so we can bring it to the market. So that's on the technology side. On the market side, we want to sign an agreement with a partner for our pilots, because the next step after the stack demo, this TRL5, is TRL6. And TRL6 is having a demo in the market on the customer side. So that's another kind of 100x scale up, and that is proving our system commercially in the market with an end consumer who will pay for the clean ammonia that we produce. Got
it. Cool. Thank you. Karen, I'm going to go to you then. So you already kind of covered the biggest challenge. What's been the biggest challenge in evaluating the market opportunities and risks for Ammobia?
Great question. So Ammobia is in the clean ammonia world, which you could kind of lump together with the clean hydrogen world, which is a market where there's a lot of traction, and also there's a lot of uncertainty still. So it's kind of this exciting times in the market where there's a lot changing and there's a lot of opportunity that comes with that. But it also comes with challenges because there's a lot still to be defined. It's a market where most people are aligned that there's a lot of opportunity, but still a lot of questions on which use cases are going to take off first. How big will the opportunity really be? How will the supply chain play out? Will it be existing ammonia customers, or will it be new players coming into the market? What technologies are going to win? And so I think that combination of that opportunity and uncertainty in the market definitely comes with a challenge where there is a market risk, and investors that have never looked at the hydrogen and ammonia market before might kind of shy away a little bit from that because there's a lot in the market that is evolving, and it's frankly, even for me, difficult to stay up to date on the latest on all of that. So I think that fast evolving market with still a lot of uncertainty comes with challenges for us to pick and choose on where we want to go first, and also for investors to gain comfort on the market risk that is there on top of the technology risk.
Well, thanks, Karen. Jose, what would you say is your biggest challenge, has been your biggest challenge in evaluating market opportunities and risks for Cobalt?
So I think probably one big challenge is dealing with the fact that there's a wide spectrum of customer types in terms of where they are in their net zero journey. So some, for example, we've only had one customer in the US. That's starting to change in terms of potential customers and interest in reducing nitrous oxide emissions from wastewater treatment plants. And it's starting to change quickly. But up to now, there hasn't been a lot of interest. All of our customers have been overseas, mainly in Europe. So trying to understand how to sell to customers has been a big challenge, because what might work in one market or geographical area won't work at all in a different one. And when you're, I guess that's difficult to also communicate to investors, because they want to know that you can sell everywhere. So yeah, they ask a lot of tough questions about that, and how we plan to deal with that. So I think that's a big challenge in just dealing with all the different types of customer types, but it's important to understand that. And then, so I think, what was the second part of the question?
That's really it. It's just the market opportunities, well, and risks, evaluating
risk.
market opportunity and risks. Sorry.
Yeah. So the risk part, so a big part of risk is also competitors. So really understanding what the competitive landscape looks like, not just from like companies, but also IP. So I think that's really important to do. I mean, it's not easy to do. So I think having the right advice, if you can have, without having to pay some legal advice from experienced patent lawyers, can be priceless to help navigate through that and understand how to deal with those risks and de-risk those issues.
Thanks, Jose. That's excellent. Jose, I'm going to ask you to go first on this next question. And that is, could you just elaborate a little bit more on your fundraising hurdles and successes? So I know you've both spoken about your fundraising a bit, but just to elaborate a little bit on the hurdles and successes that you've had at Cobalt.
Yeah, so I think that the biggest hurdles in the past, similar to what Karen has faced, and when you start to talk about the technology and the science, some people it can go over their head, and since it's something they've never dealt with, have a hard time getting interested in it, and that has for us been a really big hurdle because not even just wastewater, but drinking water, period, is one of those things, especially in the developed world, people just don't think about it until you don't have it. You really take it for granted that, okay, we just need to flush the toilet, we forget about it. We just turn on the tap, you don't have to worry. So when we start talking about wastewater, it's in the fact that, yeah, there's nitrous oxide emissions from the treatment process. It's something people have never heard of. It's not like EV technology that's something that's very consumer facing. Everyone knows about it and can get it easily interested in it. But wastewater is not exactly the same. So that's been a big hurdle. But on the flip side, in terms of the successes, has going through a program like V4C has helped us communicate the value proposition in a way where it's not the icky wastewater, that there is strong business opportunity in selling N2O reduction to water utilities, because no one's going to invest if there's no returns. But also what I liked about the program, which also I think helped communicate to investors and especially get climate tech investors interested, was the focus on the impact. So if you can communicate that impact in the right way, it shouldn't matter that it's coming from wastewater or not. So because of that, we've been able to get farther than we ever have in terms of the fundraising process and in conversations with investors.
Great, Jose. Thank you. Karen, the same question for you. If you could just elaborate a little bit on the major hurdles and successes that Ammobia has had in the fundraising realm.
Absolutely. And that definitely empathize with what Jose mentioned with wastewater. Same with ammonia. It's not something people typically talk about over beers. And if they do, they talk about the fact that they use it as a cleaning product and not that it can decarbonize 5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, hurdles, frankly, I think being an early stage company with technology risk in a market that is uncertain as first-time founders is just a lot of risk. And so that's a lot of things for investors to be comfortable, to get comfortable with, to be able to say yes and invest in us and back us. If I think about successes, and maybe I'll spin it a bit and talk about lessons learned. First one is something that you already mentioned, Jack, really running a structured process and not starting before you're fully ready. And when you're ready, creating a lot of momentum at the same time to create some kind of sense of urgency as well, because that's how the VC market works. And that's how you get to kind of traction and you can move forward and you really feel that you're gaining traction with investors. Second one is trying to spend time with investors that are aligned as possible, as aligned as possible with you from the get-go, right? And what I mean there is, there's a lot of things to get comfortable with. It helps if you talk to investors that have invested in similar things. So investors that have done hard tech before, investors that have invested in your space before. Because if you have to convince investors who've never done hard tech before, who are just getting into climate about everything, that's going to be a hard sell. So kind of the more you can find investors that are already aligned with as many things as possible, the easier it gets to get to a path forward together. And the third one is also a lesson learned very much from the V4C program, is focusing on the relationship building aspect, because ultimately it's all about people. It's all about the relationships you build with individuals at the different funds. And when I think back about the whole process, and the investors that ultimately said yes, almost all of them are ones where we went out our way to jump on a plane, to go meet them in person, to spend a full day with them, and that was really what helped them get to a yes.
Karen and Jose, I've got a few more questions that I'll get to if we have time at the very end, but I've got some from the audience that I want to make sure we address because they're pretty compelling. This is for both of you. And Karen, we'll start with you on this. What are some key milestones from a technical aspect that investors were looking for you to have accomplished at Ammobia at the pre-seed and seed stages? What were they seeking before they were willing to actually put their money in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, having the science as much de-risked as possible. Before we started the V4C program, we had done just a few experiments with a reactor that wasn't even ours. We were kind of using it from a university. Getting this chance to set up our own reactors, started doing our first tests and generating good results was very instrumental in getting our investors to gain comfort with what we're doing. And I mean, the specifics are obviously very dependent on what you're working on, but two things that matters a lot for us was performance and durability. So not only showing that it works, but also showing that it works for a considerable amount of time.
Perfect. Cool. Jose, same question for you. Some key milestones that you feel investors were looking for that you really needed to accomplish at Cobalt before they were willing to seriously consider putting money in.
Well, since the program, I would say we had achieved all of the milestones that they were looking for, and that's probably part of the reason why we've gotten farther than ever before. But from previous experience and conversations, I think the key things were product market fit, and I think not necessarily having revenue, because especially at the pre-seed stage, that's always nice, but not a must. We happen to have revenue, so that helps the conversation definitely. But I think having that strong product market fit is definitely a must. And some traction, not necessarily revenue, but pilots, interest in pilots, or people committing to do pilots is a big thing. And I think having had probably some strong driver, like regulation or something to create urgency in what you're selling. I think has always come up a lot in questions. We ask, okay, is there anyone required to reduce their nitrous oxide? And in some countries they are, but in others they're not. And if you can ever say that yes, then that certainly would ease the anxiety in the investor.
Just one thing I'll add about Cobalt Water and Jose that is unusual. Jose really had his product concept ready before a lot of early stage companies do, and he was unafraid to go out there and courageously start talking with customers, in this case, water treatment facilities around the world, and convinced quite a few to actually run pilots. So that's pretty extraordinary. And I just want to call out his strength and courage and success in that regard. We've got two questions from the audience, Karen, specifically for Ammobia. Here's one. There's a great deal of interest in ammonia as a hydrogen carrier, and many companies developing small-scale systems for making ammonia. What proof points has Ammobia been able to generate to show that it can do this better and meet price point at scale to attract early investors? Oh, you're on mute still, Karen.
Thank you. That's a great question. Indeed, when we started working on ammonia 3 years ago, there were frankly almost no companies working on innovating on ammonia synthesis. Now there's a few. We think it's good because it shows that there's traction and opportunities in the market. Ammonia is a commodity, right? There's no such thing as our ammonia is better than other ammonia. So then from that commodity perspective, there's two things that matter. One is what's the carbon footprint of your ammonia? And the second one is, what is the cost at which you produce it? So your levelized cost of production. Ammobia's innovation enables a significantly lower pressure of the production process, 10 times lower pressure than the conventional process. So we run at 20 bar instead of 200 bar. And that comes with a massive reduction in CapEx and hence levelized cost of production. So that's really where we see our differentiator. We can produce clean ammonia at a much lower cost than definitely the incumbents, and from what we've seen, also other innovators in the space.
Cool. And one kind of a follow-on question, but from a different person, is who are your major competitors at Ammobia?
Let's see. So there's the bucket of like incumbents, which is like the Yaras of this world who've been out there for 100 years. In the innovator buckets, there's a few, just to put some names out there. There's Starfire, Empower, Liquium, Nitrovolt, and some others. Cool.
So we are at time, believe it or not. I want to extend my deepest thanks to Karen and to Jose, who are, I consider both of them friends. And so that's one of the things that happens through this program. And I am planning on helping them both continue on their journey because I think they're amazing people. They have wonderful teams, and they're really doing some remarkable work to help mitigate greenhouse gases and improve the world for all of us. So thank you, Karen. Thank you, Jose. Thanks to my team, Chris, and to Devin. And thanks all of you for joining us. We really appreciate your level of interest. If you are interested in applying, Chris has something in the chat right now, and Devin does as well, in terms of please apply for cohort 4, Venture for ClimateTech. You can always find us on the web too at forclimatetech.org. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Take care.
Thank you. I make